This is the project that we're going to be working through in the course. I've got the whole PDF set here of the documents that we're going to learn how to do. We'll be doing the floor plan, the elevations, the exterior, the interior elevations, kitchen plan, bathroom plan, electrical plan, reflected ceiling, and a furniture plan. And scheduling. So these are all of the typical things that as designers we're doing on a day-to-day basis. So this is what we're going to work through. But we're going to start with importing this into the program so that you can just trace over this. And so let's just head over there and get started with that. So let's head over to Premiere. And I'm going to start with a new plan. So if you go to new plan from template, you can go here. And if you need to go here, I'm going to be using this just regular residential template here. The M is if you're using metric, choose the metric one. If you're using feet and inches, do the residential template. This is the one that comes straight out of the box with the program when you buy the program. So this is the one we're going to use in this course. Okay, the first thing we're going to do is import the PDF, and we're also going to import it as an image so that we can see the difference between the two. So we're going to go to File, Import, Import PDF. And so I've got a folder here with my PDF in it. And here is the PDF that I just showed you. And it will give you the option of which page, or you can import all of them. So I only want this floor plan, so I'm just going to import page 1, and okay, and there it is. So when the PDF imports, it's pretty big file, really. So you can see it's kind of slow. It kind of bogs things down a little bit. So I actually prefer to import it as an image. So the easiest way to do that is to, let's see, just go to your file, and I have saved the PDF as images. So you could do a screenshot or however you want to, if you can make that floor plan into an image. So I've got that as an image here, and I'm just going to grab it and pull it over, drag it and drop it into the file. It's just as easy as that. So let me grab that and scoot that over. So there's the difference between an image and the PDF. I personally prefer the image. If you've received a PDF that you need to import, you can just open that up and screenshot it and drop it in that way. That's probably the easiest thing to do. Once you get it in, you can crop it. You can just grab these and crop it down to make viewing easier. You can do the same thing with the image. You can just crop that down. And then what you're going to want to do is scale it properly. So what you want to do is find some dimensions, and hopefully your plan has plenty of good dimensions. So just find one that's an easy dimension. So this one here is 5'3". That's an easy dimension. So I'm going to select the image, and then I'm going to use this tool right here. This is the point-to-point resize. So I can grab that, and you see my cursor turns into point A. So I know this distance here from here is 5'3", so I'm just going to click as close as I can to the center of this line to make my point A. And see, now it turns to point B. And I'm going to drag across over here to point B, and it's just as close to the center of that one. And I know it's 5'3", so I'm going to input 5'3". And so now that has scaled my drawing to the proper scale. So now if I were to just want to draw a line across here, if I start as close as I can in the middle there and pull that across, and you can see down at the bottom of the screen where the numbers are ticking up as I pull that across, there's 5'3", just perfect right across there. And I can check a vertical dimension as well. So there is there, and that's 3 feet, just like that. So that's perfect. So that is now scaled properly for me to trace over. I can do the same thing with the PDF. Grab that, point to point, point A, point B, 5'3", and scaled. And I hit enter afterwards, and that scaled it down. Okay, so now I've got both of my images there, whichever one you're planning to use. So the next thing I want to show you is the layer. When you bring things in, it automatically puts them onto the CAD default layer. This one does too, goes onto this CAD default layer. Also, any lines that you draw, if you're going to use the CAD tool, that goes onto the CAD default as well. So for me personally, that can get messy later on when I'm turning off and on my layers. So let me just get rid of that. So I actually like to move these to a different layer. So if you select the item, you go here, you can open its dialog box, and you can go here to this line style tab, and then here's where your layers go. So you can move it to a different layer. So I like to make my own layer for that, the one that is not in here by default. There's not a layer specifically for that. There is an image layer. There is an images layer. So if you are in Home Designer Pro and you cannot make your own layer, then choose one that makes sense for you, and use one of the other layers that makes sense for you, that you might not want to, that you might be able to turn off later, so that when you want to turn this off later, you're not also turning off other things. But I'm going to make my own layer. I'm going to go here and to define a layer, and I'm going to make a new one right here. Make a new layer. So new layer, and I'm going to call this my CAD import. So that could be anything. It could be my as-built or whatever I'm doing. I'm going to call it my CAD import. So I'm going to call it OK, and there's my new layer. So OK, and now that's going to be on that layer. So later I can turn that image off after I'm done tracing it. But I don't want to delete it, so that it's there later if I need to go back and check anything. So I'm going to click OK. And so now that is on my CAD import layer. And so later, if I want to turn that off, I can just turn that off, and it only turns that off. It doesn't turn off the other, see, here's those lines that I drew earlier. So now those aren't turned off. So I could do the same thing with this one. But I'm actually just going to delete the PDF, because I'm not going to use the PDF. I'm going to use my image. And I'm going to go back over here to my, what did I call it? I called it CAD import. There we go. I'm going to turn that back on, and there it is. So I'm going to delete those other lines that I drew earlier. And now I have my my properly scaled image ready for me to trace. The other type of file that you may need to import for tracing is going to be a DWG file that you may receive. So let's do that one. We're going to go to File and Import, and we're going to import a drawing, a DWG. So it brings you to this window here. We're going to go to Next. And we've got to browse to the file. So I've got to go here, and I'm in my course, and I've got my sample DWG here that I'm going to open up there. And so now we've got that. There's some options here. I only bring in, what's referenced in the drawing. We don't need the extra stuff. And I just batch all of everything together once it's in. So I just stick with the defaults here. Go to next. So these are all of the layers that are there. So I'm just going to go keep all of that. You can choose which ones you want to be visible or not. And I'm going to go to next. And then it tells you which layer you want to put those things on. So I don't want it to go to that CAD default layer like we talked about before. I want it to go to my import layer that I made. And again, if you're in Home Designer Pro, you have to choose a layer that's already available here. You can't make your own. So that's just something you'll have to kind of decide on a system that works well for you. So I made myself a CAD import layer. So I'm just going to put everything on that and go to next. And my units are inches. Obviously, if you're in metric or whatever you're using, choose it there. Just make sure it's the same units. That way it'll come in scale properly. And yes, I want it to bring in my dimensions if they're there. And this just places the drawing at the origin. So next and finish. And yes, because we turned that layer off. So I'm going to finish again. And now it's importing the DWG. And there it is. So it has brought in the file as a block. So everything has been grouped together, and it's bringing in this huge file with absolutely everything in it that was in that DWG file. This may work for you, this may not. Typically, I do not like to do it this way. This causes a whole bunch of extra geometry going on in my project, and it's very messy. So what I like to do is either print the CAD file into a PDF and bring it out in like that, or print it, screenshot it, somehow make it into an image so that it looks like this and it doesn't come in like this. Sometimes you might, find this necessary. I don't prefer to do it this way because it comes in very messy. But it does come in as initially as a block, and then you can move it where you want it. And then all of these lines are separate individual lines. It's not a 3D drawing or anything like that. These are all just lines. And then you can group this together and keep it on its own layer. And then you can also lock that layer so that you can't move it later once you start tracing over it. So typically what I like to do is, first of all, I'll delete everything I don't want, which is that. So let's get rid of that. And then I'm going to group all of that together with this right here. Make CAD block. That groups it. So that's the same thing as grouping in SketchUp or even in AutoCAD, but that groups everything together. And you can easily ungroup it if you ever needed to by clicking the little explodey box. And it's put it onto the CAD default layer again. So I would want to move all of that. When I grouped it, it put it on this, so onto this layer. So I'd want to move that to my other layer also. So let's move that to my CAD import layer. So now that's on that layer too. So if I were to turn it all off and on, it would turn off later if I needed it to. And then the other thing you can do is you can lock this layer so that as you're drawing over it, you can't accidentally pick things up or move anything that's happening in there. So if you are bringing in a CAD drawing to trace over or do anything with, and you don't want to accidentally move anything, be sure to lock that layer. That's another reason to put it on its own layer so that it's lockable. And then I can just unlock it if I need to move it around or change anything that's in here for some reason. There is also a tool within Chief Architect that you will convert your lines into walls and doors and windows for you. It is here under CAD to walls. And you have some options here. I'm going to cancel out. I'm not going to go through this process. It takes quite a bit of work and cleanup to get it to do it for you. You can't have any of this extra information here. It will only read parallel lines that are within a certain distance of each other. So if any of this hatching, all of this extra lines here, it won't work. So you have to go in and really do a lot of cleanup with this kind of file. Now, if you receive a very simple file, it can work, but we're not going to go through that process here in this lesson.